Introducing health and wellness advocate, veteran international real estate investment expert, author and speaker, Adiel Gorel.
Health tips, fitness tips, nutrition and well-being, world-class experts, all right here on my podcast, The Adiel Gorel Show. Well, hi, everybody. I'm very glad to be here with you again. I'm very excited. Today, we have Dr. Torkil Færø. And of course, he's talking about material that every single one of you viewers and listeners knows about and is using in your daily lives. And apparently, Torkil is going to teach us how to really look at those measurements, results of all those things that we use to measure our life, whether it's Fitbit or the Apple Watch or the Garmin, and how to really, in a cohesive way, this could be a big step. I'm excited about it. So, Torkil, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Adiel. Nice to be here.
And just to get a background, I know I don't want to bore you. I know that everybody who is interviewing you says the same thing, but gotta say it, if you can give us your background, how did you get to this point? How did you start? A little bit about your book, maybe, so we can get started.
Yeah, I'm a Norwegian doctor, medical doctor. I'm a ER physician, a general practitioner. Been working like that for 26 years. Been seeing more than 100,000 consultations with people. And for the last 5-6 years, I've been using wearables to track my health, to track the heart rate variability, which is a biometric for the state of the autonomic nervous system and the general state of our body. And I've been writing a book about that. It's called The Pulse Cure. In Norway, it's been a tremendous success. It's still on the bestseller list after more than 2 years, 2 years and 4 months now, soon. Translated into 7 languages, has just transformed my life from being a normal doctor into being a Norwegian celebrity, being recognized everywhere and being in the media, for 2 years, because in Norway, this is really caught off. So everybody knows now that these wearables is something you can use to get better health, better well-being, feel better, identify energy thieves that just saps you of your forces below your surface or without you knowing about it. So that is what I'm doing now. Still working at the ER, but still, like, tomorrow I'll have a lecture flying to another city. I'll have 3 lectures this week. I have probably 8 podcasts. And this, I know that, of course, so many people in the US have the wearables. There are, to my knowledge, The Pulse Cure is the only book that tells you how to combine the best lifestyle strategies for health and then compare it with how it will affect the heart rate variability, so that you can use these wearables as a speedometer, as a guide for how to improve your life.
Yeah, that's a wonderful background. And I would like to begin by reaching out to the person who is viewing this or listening in the car and go back to, you mentioned it several times, explain heart rate variability, or, HRV, and why it is such a crucial measure of our state and how we measure, please, if you can go along
Yeah,
with that.
absolutely. Because it is so that the very most basic vital signs, the heart rate compared to our breath, will tell us so much about the state of our body. Of course, it was known to the ancient doctors of Greece and China and India and so on for centuries. But it's still like that how our heart rate will respond to any, stressor, it will be revealed in the heart rate. So, and the heart rate variability is the variation between heartbeats. Not the pulse rate in itself, which could be, like 70 in a resting heart rate or 120 when you're running and so on. but the variation between heartbeats. And the importance of that is that it shows us the state of our autonomic nervous system, the system that is divided into the parasympathetic rest and digest part and the sympathetic fight, flight, and freeze part. And that would be at the extremes. This system is always operating, even in between those two extreme states. And in the parasympathetic restful state, when we are calm, when we breathe in, the heart rate will go up a little bit. And when we breathe out, it will go down a little bit to save energy now that there's less oxygen in the lungs, when we are breathing out. But if we are in the stressful state, the heart will beat like a metronome, regardless of us breathing in or out. It's like our body, our ancient system, because this system we share with all vertebrates. It's hundreds of millions of years old, still working pretty much in the same way. So when we're in the stress state, it beats like a metronome, like our organism saying, okay, now this organism is in danger. We need to use all available forces, and we cannot save energy even when there's less oxygen in the lungs. And of course, the wearables can track this round the clock. While we are busy living our lives, it will keep track of the intensity, the pressure on our system to find out, and combined with artificial intelligence and compared with measurements from millions of users, it can tell us whether our strain is sustainable or not, or compatible with health. So this is some of the most important metrics we can have as doctors. And of course, as people or patients, we have it available in our hands, literally, at any time we would wish to see it. And the apps that belongs to, like Garmin and Apple Watch and Oura Ring and all the different devices will give us the numbers in a way that makes this actionable, that you can take appropriate steps towards a better stress balance, so to speak.
So let's drill a little bit deeper into heart rate variability. So if we construct a spectrum, 0 to 100, is it better? Again, I happen to know this, but some people who may listen know. Is it better to have lower, higher? What's better and why?
It's better to have a higher heart rate variability. That shows that you have a capacity, that you are robust, you're resilient, you have, tolerance towards stress. So the better your heart rate variability, that is a sign of a good, sustainable health. The lower the heart rate variability, it's a sign of a stressed system with less capacity for your immune system to work. So if you are stressed, you're drinking alcohol, you're eating the wrong food, you're overweight, you're undertrained, your body is working, at full speed the whole time just to keep you going. And will be not enough forces or will be prioritized by your body. So your immune system will always be lacking. And that lays the ground for all kinds of diseases, which is why also if you Google research papers and comparing heart rate variability and almost any disease you can think of, there will be a connection. So the lower the heart rate variability, the more probability that you will contract one of the lifestyle diseases. That is what we are dealing with as doctors. This is all lifestyle now.
So if somebody wears, an Oura Ring, which, by the way, I think I noticed you have 2 of them.
I have one Oura Ring, I have one Samsung Ring and one Norwegian Inspire Ring. I have a Garmin watch and a Whoop band. So that is because this is, it's my job to keep track of the different devices that people use. I think if I only needed 1 or 2, I would probably use the Garmin and the Oura Ring. Okay, and if I just had to have one, that would be the Garmin watch.
So suppose you got your measurement and the news is not good news. Your HRV is low.
Mm-hmm.
what are actionable things you can do?
Yeah. When I started doing this, I, of course, had no plans of writing a book. Just a normal doctor, just finding out accidentally that there's an instrument that can do this. And that was, I used a heart rate monitor, ECG device that I was, putting on, taping on my chest and finding out. And I had no guidebook. I only got these readings, the graphs of a 24/7 graphs of this. And I thought that I was calm because mentally I'm never in the fight, flight, and freeze mode. Probably as an ER doctor, you're very calm. You're trained to deal with stressful situations in a calm way. And so I was expecting just to see the parasympathetic mode. So my surprise was big when I saw that I was in the stressful state almost all the time. Because it was not the mental stress, it was the food I was eating, it was the alcohol I was drinking, it was a lack of sleep, and it was eating at the wrong times of the day. Such things. It could be heat, that it was too hot while I'm sleeping compared to turning the temperature down. These kind of things. So I think most people, of course, will find out that they are more stressed than they would wish to see. Because, of course, 80% of the diseases we doctors treat these days has a relationship to too much stress. So 80% would expect to see, a lot of stress in their lives. So, and when you see that, then, or what I had to do was find out, to do the detective work, to detangle, okay, what is this? What is this stress? And that is how I wrote the book, so that you don't have to do, all the same job yourself. You can see that, okay, my stress is high in the evening. Okay, maybe I'm eating too late. Maybe I should stop eating at 7 p.m. instead of 9 p.m. That earlier I could do that. Now I understand that is terrible for the health, for the stress levels and so on. So most people would find out that they are too stressed.
Again, I'm quite interested in your book, and I know that I'm going to get it. I didn't have an opportunity to read your book before our show, which is really a shame, but I will. But the things you mentioned sounds like the low-hanging fruit. To eat well, probably not eat a lot of processed food, but eat good, natural, organic, whatever you want to call it. Not to eat too close to bedtime, not to sleep in a bedroom that's too warm, not to drink alcohol. Some people now say, don't drink it at all. I mean, it used to be that a couple of glasses a day was good, and depending on your gender and size. Now there's a new trend where people just don't drink at all. I mean, and maybe move your body. So people talk about meditation, people talk about those kinds of things. To me, these are the low-hanging fruit in the community of people that are watching the show. So that would be the first place to start, wouldn't they? But what would be more that we can do?
Yeah. So most people would find out that those things will affect the stress levels. And what is nice is that you can see how it affects it. So it's also motivating, for example, to do a cold shower or a cold plunge when you see the calming effect on your system. It's more motivating to skip the drink when you know how it will affect the stress system. So it's like having a speedometer, so you can see these effects. It's more obvious. Some people, and that would be important also, that the menstrual cycle is a big factor. So for women in the fertile age, the week before menstruation is a physiological load on your system. So it's not just a feeling or a mood, but you can see it in the heart rate variability, that it's the drop is as big as having a strong COVID infection.
Wow.
But once you start to mitigate that stress, avoiding, because many women will have cravings for ultra-processed food, and chocolate and a glass of wine and so on to comfort themselves. But when you see the stress that adds to the system, you skip that, then you will be able to mitigate this down dip in the stress levels. And you will also, to a large degree, lose the PMS symptoms that goes along with it. So I would add that as well. But for most people, when they do that, they will find that they have a good balance and they will not need to, pay so much attention to it. Once in a while, they see that they are overworked and they should skip the hard exercises and so on. Other people can find that, okay, they're not capable, even with those strategies you mentioned, they're still not getting into the parasympathetic mode. Then it could be that they have a food intolerance, for example. It could be vitamin deficiency, B12 or vitamin D or iron, in the case of women. It could be that they are discovering the first signs of a disease, like their a thyroid disease or even cancer. So, for example, cancer will be showing in the heart rate variability. So there are several examples that people have seen that there's a drop in HRV over time. They cannot explain it. They do all the things that you mentioned and more, and it's still it's no improvement. And then they go to the doctor and see that, okay, it was cancer. It was a lump in the breast or so on. So several examples of that, because everything that will put a strain on your body, like fighting a cancer or an infection, of course, will be visible then in the heart rate variability.
Yeah, so that kind of took care of my next question to you. My next question to you was to measure, and you see that you're in a good state, and you make it even better by doing all the good things that we mentioned. And then you say, look, I happen to be a very disciplined person. I continue to live my life like this. I can shed the measurement. Now, why would somebody want to shed the measurement? Because all of these devices are connected to some extraneous electromagnetic spectrum. And that's another whole issue that people say, well, I would rather minimize stuff on my skin that is connected to Wi-Fi or Bluetooth, and especially when I sleep at night. So if I got to a steady state and I know I'm disciplined, now what you said is actually a counter to that argument that I just made. Say, well, what if something is developing inside of you? God forbid, you're not going to be able to see it for maybe decades, stuff like that.
Yeah, that's true. And part of the reason is that we are not really equipped. We are very poor at sensing the state of our own body. So, and that is from nature's side, because it needed to prioritize the senses to outward threats. We have excellent eyesight, excellent hearing, excellent smell, excellent taste and sense of touch, because that is how we could find what threatened our life and health throughout history. Because all the threats came from the outside, other animals, foul food and such things. But what threatens our health now is stress levels out of balance. For example, if our blood sugar is high, we don't feel it. If our blood pressure is high, it needs to be very, very high until we feel that, because we don't have a kind of an alarm system for these modern days problems. So, and that is why people get into a burnout situation, because they cannot really feel it before it's too late and it has been too much of a stress on the system. But it will be visible in the heart rate way before you feel the symptoms yourself. So of course, one that shed the watch and think that, okay, I found out some things and just put it away. Yeah, it could happen that something comes up and they will not discover it. So, and those people maybe it depends on how you look at it, because how I look at it is that this is like a dashboard to your physiology. Just like in your car, you want to know your speed, you want to know how much fuel is left, you want to know the outside temperature, and you want to know if all your lights are working and so on, the temperature of the engine and so on. And this is like having a dashboard to your physiology. So then you have to choose, okay, do I want to see that dashboard or not? Or do I want to see it just sometimes or all the time?
Well,
just
actually, that could be a happy medium, because again, the dashboard doesn't come for free. some people will talk very loud against having non-native, EMFs on our body, especially at night. So that could be an excellent solution. People will say, great, I'll wear it maybe whatever. It's a certain frequency, usually in the daytime, and see what's going on. That's maybe it's a happy medium. Most people don't care because we are swimming in a sea of electromagnetic waves anyway.
Yeah. I don't see much effect on the wearables anyway. And usually all the wearables can be put in the flight mode. So they can register, that they are just using the lights to register inside, the ring or the watch, and you have it in the flight mode. And then once a day, you take it off flight mode, let them synchronize, and then put it back again in flight mode. So, and you can be out of the room, while you do that. But just as you say, it's probably just, just a drop in the ocean, just a small,
it is
little wave in a storm.
Really. I mean, most people, you can see them on the street walking with their phone. I mean, that's not even in the same league as what we're talking about. So, but again, just to cover that, actually, I remember not too long ago, somebody was trying to talk me into getting a PEMF mat, a newer version of a good one, supposedly, that everybody likes. And one of the compelling arguments that someone made was, hey, I went to a clinic right next to where I live in LA, he said, and I measured my HRV. And then I used a mat for a month, twice a day, and I didn't change anything else in my life. And my HRV was much better. So that was a very compelling argument for this PEMF device. Now, of course, PEMF, that will also have pros and cons, and people saying that it's an arbitrary wavelength that somebody else chose and it may not be. But anyway, in this particular example, because it's so new, somebody actually was using, HRV as a tool to market it.
Yeah, because if it has effect, of course, things can have an effect even if you don't see it in the heart rate variability. But if it does show in the heart rate variability, you know that there is an effect on your system. And that is also part of the success behind the pulse cure, that practitioners that until now have been regarded as alternative practice, now suddenly their customers can see that there's a difference. And they're the happiest ones, of course, because they've been looked at, like weird people, but now that they can see the effect on the autonomic nervous system, of course, the customers come back, because they can see that it has an effect. It's not just a placebo effect or whatever. So that makes it very popular. And I must also say that a lot of the diseases, the stress-related diseases, will not show up on our lab tests. So many of the people that has been plagued by an autonomic nervous system dysregulation, they have been not believed by the doctors, as they didn't have anything to measure, and doctors, they're weird in this way that what I don't know and what I can't measure cannot really exist. It's probably something you're making up. But it will show in the heart rate variability and in the stress system. And when I'm talking about micromanaging the stress system like I'm doing, I'm mainly talking about using the Garmin watches. But at least so far, the only one that comes close to the ECG system that I had, that is the Garmin watches. And the reason is that they are implementing the system from First Beat Analytics, a Finnish company with more than 20 years experience in physiological measurements. And Garmin has bought the company and put the system into their watches. So you wouldn't necessarily be able to micromanage your stress levels like that with a Fitbit or an Apple Watch or an Oura Ring or other devices or a Whoop band. So, but they may have other advantages. The other ones.
Actually, as a point of general interest, and correct me if I'm wrong, but isn't a lot of the Oura Ring company based in Finland?
Yeah, so Finland has been at the forefront of this. Absolutely. So the Oura is Finnish and First Beat is Finnish. But Garmin is American, Whoop is American. So
did you say
some
Whoop? How do you spell
Whoop. WHOOP.
Okay, just like I would think.
So
What do they do?
they have a band, so it's a bracelet. And the advantage of Whoop is that you are putting into a daily journal. You are kind of checking off the things you have been doing that particular day, and then Whoop use that information to give you a weekly and monthly report, and of course daily report on your recovery state and your strain level. And it's less intrusive, so maybe people don't like to see a screen. They want to check their state in the morning to see how much energy or physiological reserves they have to spend that day. And Whoop will then, along the day, will measure the strain, and then they will reach a spot that says, okay, this is enough for today. Or it will say that, okay, today, why not go for a run now? You have more energy, and so on. And I'm not sure if you're into soccer, but Cristiano Ronaldo, the soccer player, he uses the Whoop band and says it's like having a doctor on the wrist. And I would agree to that. This is like having a lab on your wrist, because what these trackers use, it's a heart rate, it's your oxygen level, it's your temperature, it's your pattern of movement. And from that information, they can tell you so much about how you're living, what is happening that would be impossible to feel yourself, particularly while you're living your life, and particularly if you're living a stressful life.
So I know this is a question that you get a lot. It's not really a question that comes from my heart, because I understand what you're talking about. And I like it. I'm an engineer from Silicon Valley by background. So you say dashboard, I'm in. I want to see a dashboard, especially about my life. Yeah. But I bet you get the following question all the time. And I'd like to see what you say to it. I kind of split it into two. One, sometimes people don't play golf because they're very competitive and the numbers drive them crazy. And the handicap is exactly one, and they want to get it better. And they go and they think they're obsessed with it to the point that their life is maybe not as, full, so to speak. That's one thing. The other is, what about fun? People, I'm sure, ask you, what about fun? I want to go to the pub. I want to have drinks with my friends. I want to relax. I don't want to be an obsessive. I know you get those questions every day. What do you say to those questions?
Yeah, for the obsessive part, then I would say that then it usually the way you obsess about this instrument is the way you obsess about everything. So then you can use the specific example of how you relate to this instrument, and you can learn how to relate to things in a better way, so that golf will not be as painful as you describe there. So I think that would be just a learning experiment, because so many psychologists, for example, say that to their clients that would have this kind of problem. So they said, just throw away the watch, but the problem will not go away by throwing off the watch that shows the dashboard, that you're too stressed. So it's like, that would be like going to the doctor and you have a fever and the doctor just says, well, put away the thermometer, the disease will not go away. So I would say that this is a chance to use this because, Buddha is quoted to say that how you do something is how you do everything. So to use it as a learning experience, I would say. Of course you can throw it away. I don't care what you do, or people do. My responsibility is only to make them aware that this is a possibility. So just like, okay, if I was writing a cooking book on how to make Asian recipes, it's for the people who want to make Asian recipes. If you say, I want to make hamburgers, well, fine. It's buy another book, or listen to some other people. So I've written the book, and these are devices for people who would like to have this dashboard to help them to make better choices and feel better. And the other question was just to refresh my memory.
About fun, just, hey, come on, I just want to go to the pub, have a drink with my friends.
Yeah. Then I would say that we are supposed to put stress on our system, and particularly good stress on our system. So we're not, if you just save energy, you will just become weaker. So you're supposed to stress, you're supposed to work out, to push yourself. You just have to find the balance with recovery, because we're not necessarily overstressed, but we are mainly under recovered. We haven't really had focus on recovery. And when you cannot measure your recovery or even get kind of rewarded for having done it, by seeing it on your wearable, then it's easy to just skip recovery, but there will be a price to pay for that. We're not made for that kind of intensity. The problem with the lifestyle diseases is that we're not constructed for the intensity of modern day lives. When we put these devices on hunter-gatherers, we see that they're in activity like 3 hours a day. Light activity, moderate activity, 3 hours a day. The rest of the day, they are in the relaxed mode. Of course, modern day people, they're almost the opposite. Maybe they are 3 hours in the relaxed mode, and the 10 hours a day, they're in the stressful mode. And our immune system is just not geared. It cannot operate optimally under those circumstances. So that is the problem. And that is why when you make the time to recover, then you have the forces to have fun without being exhausted. So me now, even with all this, I mean, if you don't, writing a bestseller is the worst thing you can do for your stress levels, right? And without this device, and I would have no chance to keep my stress levels. But now I can see how much do I need to relax between whatever I'm doing. And then I have the energy to have the fun, So what happens to people, who have almost like too much fun is they wear out, they burn out. They get too stressed to have fun. And of course, when you see, if your idea of fun is having a lot of alcohol or eating a lot of cakes and candy, then suddenly you see that, okay, there's a price for this, So it's a lot of stress. People quit chocolate, they quit drinking because when you can see on the stress levels, you can see that it costs you more than you thought. I used to drink those 2 glasses of wine every day. And I even thought that was the way to calm down. Of course, when you get the wearable, you see that it's the very worst way to calm down. And according to Whoop, that measures their customers or clients, alcohol is the worst stressor of all. And I thought it was the best de-stressor of all. And that just shows me how wrong, we can be in interpreting the signals from our bodies.
So before you mentioned certain modes, and one of them was the cold plunge or the cold shower. There is also the opposite, and sometimes are used, in conjunction, especially in the northern countries, which there it's almost a, tradition. You go into sauna, you go into snow, or you go in the cold lake, Wim Hof, etc. Can you talk a little bit more about how you view the cold plunge?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I did that just yesterday. I was in the sauna and in the icy cold water, just 1 or 2 degrees above the freezing here now in Norway. So, and that is a really good thing because it challenges your temperature. Because what is the problem in the modern life is that we are at the constant room temperature. It's very comfortable, but we're not challenging our system. And of course, our system is made to be challenged, in temperature. Our physiology is made in Africa, on the plains of Africa at some altitude where it was cold during the night, there was no blankets or, from 2 million years ago. So we are made to tolerate extreme temperature differences. And now that we have this room temperature, our flexibility is compromised. And using the cold plunge and the sauna is a way to kind of expand that temperature, make it more flexible. We have cold shock proteins, we have heat shock proteins that will be released, and it will help our immune system. We will get brown fat, which will be there regulating the temperature because there will be mitochondria in the brown fat that makes up the color. So there will be a lot of advantages by pushing yourself in that way. And I use the smartwatch, the Garmin watch actively then, because I can go into the sauna. I see that when my heart rate goes beyond 100, okay, then I need to go into the water. If I stay in the water maybe 2 minutes, then my heart rate goes down to maybe 50. And it will take a longer time to get up to 100 again. And then I go out into the water. So you can use it like that also to find a good balance between the heat and the cold.
Out of curiosity and to get something useful as a reference, what kind of sauna and what kind of cold plunge do you use?
It's in Norway, there's so many saunas. It's like a sauna fever, So this is right in the center of town, just by the big opera house in Oslo. It's a floating saunas. They have maybe 10, 12 saunas of different kinds, wooden, man-made, charming, rustic, and with sauna oven, some with the wood and some just with electrical heating. And then you just go diving off this raft. The sauna is kind of on a raft, kind of.
Oh, and you dive into the water later.
Yes, just jump into the water. Yeah, or if it's very icy, they have made cut out some of the ice there, but usually in the port there will not be ice in the port because there's boats all the time, big boats, and so
brutal diving.
It's brutal, yeah. Yeah, and it's fun to see the because when you're used to it, you get the tolerance or the flexibility. So it's kind of terrible, but not horrible. But when you see the tourists coming for the first time, like it was yesterday, they're just screaming, when they get into the water. So it's
I don't blame them. I really don't.
Yeah, I did that the first times as well. So it's. But you build tolerance to the cold and heat, and also outside of this situation, you get more tolerant towards heat and cold in the daily lives as well. And I know many women saying that, oh, suddenly I can tolerate being colder than I used to, So, and what you want to have in your nervous system, the point of all this is to have a flexibility in the intensity of your life, so that you're able to push yourself to the maximum when you need it, but you're also able to calm totally down when you need that, so that you have the flexibility to adapt to any situation and be in control, so that you're not stressed because the circumstances are stressful. You keep the control. You can be calm even in stressful situations, and when you need to push yourself, you can also do that.
Well, it's sort of an analogy in the temperature domain to heart rate variability. Again, how can you tolerate and how flexible you are into the variability of the temperatures? I mean, sort of in every facet. Now, there's a lot of stuff, books and books about the vagus nerves. There are devices that stimulate it. There are many things that are set up. How do you talk about that in the context of what you're talking about?
Yeah, I'm actually co-writing a vagus nerve book now that will be released in Norway in June. So yes, the vagus nerve is super important, and the HRV is kind of indirect biometric on the state of the vagus nerve. And you can also use these stimulators as you're talking about. You can have the NeuroSim that I have that you attach to your ear. There's a pulsetto thing that you can put around your neck. and that will electrically stimulate your vagus nerve. I haven't seen the research results yet, but it's supposed to be very effective against a lot of diseases. So it will be exciting to see how we can use that in the future and to use different technologies to hack our system, because it will affect all the diseases, because the root cause of disease, the problem as doctors is that we are waiting until people get sick and then we do something. And there's a lot of money in that strategy, So what we need to go is go into the root cause of things, from inflammation, from oxidative stress to insulin resistance and autonomic nervous system dysfunction. When you get these things, and also the mitochondria. So when your mitochondria are good, and your cells are good, your heart rate variability also improves. So when you have these basic systems in our body in order, it will affect and reduce the risk of all kinds of diseases. So, and that is why the vagus nerve stimulators, when they work, will affect, like 100 different diseases, because they go into to regulate the autonomic nervous system.
So you say more research is needed, but something very simple, and you're co-writing a book, you could let just a few people, even this is not an experiment, this is an N equal 1 or 2 or 3, not really an experiment, but you can let them use the stimulator and then you can measure, the HRV.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And we haven't put more, or the main author has put more stress on breath work, on different kinds of natural ways to do that. So I think it's a bit early to write in the book exactly how it works, but it seems very promising what they say. But when you're a doctor and you hear about new pharmacological things, it's always a lot of optimism, and then when the results are tested even more, then it shows that it wasn't like that anyway. So because the problem is that so far all the research, at least what I've seen on these devices, comes from the producers themselves, and so that is why we're waiting a bit, to see that, to put that into the book.
Okay, so you mentioned before about humans having evolved and having been made, so to speak, to withstand cold and heat and all of those extremes. And now we spend a lot of time in similar temperature, maybe 70 degrees or 72 even for some people, and we get soft, so to speak, not in the good way. Now, what about the other way that humans were clearly made to be? And that is, if you go back a couple of million years, or really even just a few hundred years, we spend most of our day, outdoors. Never mind hunter-gatherer, that's for sure. I'm talking just outdoors.
Everybody, yeah.
No air conditioning, no. You spend most of your day, outdoors. So what happens then? You get exposed to the light spectrum of the sun, which is by far the most powerful, bountiful, and big light spectrum, and is available in a continuity. Not like now that some people are buying a red and infrared panel. It gives you 2 frequencies. The sun gives you infinite frequencies, the visible, the non-visible. And it's been found more and more that we have not only receptors, not just in our eyes, but throughout our whole body to these kind of frequencies. How does that, connect? And then we go back a couple of 100 years ago. The sun rises, you rise. The sun sets, you set. You go to bed. Now, it's almost like, especially the younger people, live the opposite life. Many young people sleep deep into the day, and at night, now they get an abundance of the blue spectrum from devices, and we are developing almost a generation of people who are really not well. What do you say to that part of the spectrum, no pun intended?
Yeah. You just that was the summary of my next book, because I'm just starting to write the book on the sun, the effects of the sun, and that was the short version, of course, of why the sun exposure is good for us, and it's a horrible thing. It's the worst. It's a worst medical error of all time that we are advising people to stay out of the sun. Even here now in Norway, at this time of year, we are advising people to stay out of the sun. There's almost no sun, and children in kindergarten will get sunscreen, 3 times a day. It's horrible, and I think that sun exposure is one of the most important things for our health. It is, of course, also visible in the heart rate variability. So now, at this time of year, so many Norwegians in the wintertime fly to the Canary Islands, they fly to Thailand, they fly to somewhere where there's sun, and the heart rate variability just jumps up in the air. It doubles, because the sun exposure improves the mitochondria, it improves the blood circulation, it releases endorphins, it releases serotonin, dopamine, lots of different things that happens. In the mitochondria, it releases melatonin, that is an antioxidant. It improves the cytochrome oxidase, which will make the ATP production more efficient. It will release nitric oxide stored in the skin for that purpose. Of course, everybody knows that vitamin D is also made. So the loss of sunlight, the sun exposure that we are exposed to, is probably the worst thing, attack on our health. We're, of course, developed under the sun for all those millions of years, and just the idea that the sun would hurt us more than it would gain us is just preposterous. Who would have thought? Who could think that idea? And that is part of the mystery of the book that I'm writing. Who made this up? Where did this insane idea come from?
Well, what you just also said, when UVB not only create vitamin D when it comes in touch with our skin, but also breaks down into those endorphins. And when people have that, they have the sense of fullness, and they don't go into the addictive places to get those endorphins, like playing games and gambling and porn and smoking and eating cake. All the things you said, they may not need it as much if they simply get the sun on their skin. And you said yourself, if they go to Thailand on vacation, the HRV goes crazy up. By the way, there are some geniuses that came up with the idea that I'm very happy that the adults in the room, intervened and said, no. They said, well, we have global warming. Let's just cover the sky and not let the sun reach the earth. That's a genius idea, isn't it? You need to be a special kind of, excuse me, but stupid to come up with an idea like that.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
I talked to a person from Japan recently, and we were talking about the sunlight spectrum and all of that stuff. And she told me that in Japan, when they grow up, the doctors instill into everyone very powerfully, the sun is horrible, the sun is bad, don't go in the sun, put makeup that has sunscreen in it. And she said, I can't shake it. It's from childhood. And by the way, when you put sunscreen, the sunscreen will block certain frequencies of the light. You'll still get the light, but you'll get an alien light that the body doesn't even know what to do with, because it's not the full spectrum. So, I mean, that is beyond, I don't even know what to say to that. And, an auxiliary question is this. If the person who lives in Norway is a beautiful, amazing place, I love it, goes to the Canary Island, and they feel amazing. By the way, part of the reason they feel amazing probably is they walk with their toes in the sand, and they get the grounding, the electrons from the ground. Why don't they move there?
Yeah, we should all move there. I'm actually thinking of migrating for the winter. Going down to the southern parts, because there will be years to be gained from being in the sun at the winter time. So that's for sure. So and just the idea that, of course, nature has made a system in our body that gives us a tan to protect us from the sun. And just the idea to think that, okay, we can do better than that. We'll just make some sunscreen and that you have to put on several times a day, and that will replace that. It's just impossible to understand where these ideas come from.
But apparently,
and particularly when it's so wrong, because all the research that is being done now shows that it's exactly the opposite things that needs to happen. And if you get enough sunlight, the chances of you getting heart disease or cancers of all causes, drop significantly, like 30% or so.
Well, a suntan also means there is melanin out on your skin. It's visible. You got a tan. So number one, it can be looked at as a crude approximation of your vitamin D benefits, because if you're tanned, there's a likelihood that you're there when the UVB was out and you got vitamin D. And the second thing, melanin, supposedly, again, I'm not a doctor, exists not only on the outer part of your skin, but inside of your whole body. And it has a lot of beneficial qualities for us. So to not let melanin be there is also a bit of it's not particularly good.
Yeah, absolutely. So, and also the idea to think that, okay, if we are rewarded with endorphins of being in the sun, in an evolutionary sense, an animal that would be worse off from then being in contact with the sun, it would not survive. So it's another animal would take its place. So
by the way, I heard somebody who is actually going to be on my podcast soon. She is a researcher who specializes in sunlight and spectrum, all of that thing. And she said, well, why don't you use nature's sunscreen? The shade.
Yeah.
So when you see a cat laying in the sun, warming up, feeling amazing, all of a sudden they step up and they go in the shade. They're too hot. That's the sunscreen.
Yeah. And they feel that they had enough. So, and this way you would feel also, if you don't use a sunscreen, you go out in the sun and then you feel, you feel full, just like you've been eating enough, and you go into the shade.
But that's a whole other thing. I mean, I'm sure you know about the Dr. Jack Kruse, right?
Yeah, of course.
He's taken a very, very deep dive into that. And in fact, he moved himself to
El Salvador.
So, I mean, he talks, of course, a lot about that the mitochondria, and again, I'm speaking like an idiot, but you're a doctor, so you can, the mitochondria doesn't know if you had peas or, a tomato or chicken. It just knows the electrons, the protons, the neutrons that it gets. So when you step on the sand on the beach and the negative charge of the sand gets into you, it gives you electrons, the mitochondria sees the electrons the same as when you ate chicken. The same thing for them.
Yeah.
So basically we eat from here, we eat by getting the sun and the melanin and all of that stuff, and we eat by grounding. So we actually eat from three. And again, I think you notice if you go to the vacation in the south, you're not as hungry when you're out in the sun.
Yeah, absolutely. So it's so eating food is okay. Of course, there's other advantages to eating food that you get the building blocks of proteins and fats and so on for the cells to work. But energy wise, we can get the electrons, from the sun. So we are walking solar panels, so we are taking in the energy. And of course, our mitochondria have found a way to use that energy throughout those millions of years.
So since we got here, and since you live up north, what do you think of, deuterium, depleted water?
I'm not. I don't know about that enough.
So that's related also to the whole thing with the mitochondria. But apparently, when you live down south near the equator, you get excellent sun, and you've already seen all the benefits of that. When you live up north, you don't get the excellent sun, but you get the cold. And that's why the cold apparently has a similar beneficial effect on the mitochondria.
Yeah, it makes UV light, supposedly. So the mitochondria, if it's too cold, it makes UV light in tiny, tiny amounts inside the cells.
Isn't this amazing? We either get the UV light from the sun or we make it ourselves from the cold. Unbelievable.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a great system, and that is why the flaw of the medical society to think that we can fix metabolic disease by giving them medicine for hypertension, for diabetes, for the depression, everything that we medicate is just a substitute for living in a natural way. So, and that is the good things about the technology that we're talking about is it points backwards in time. So it shows that if you live closer to the circumstances of our ancestors, you're healthier, and it will be shown in the heart rate. And that's how it kind of guides us to, and we don't need to live in the total state like on the savannah, but we need to move towards that. We need to eat food that we are made for and that our immune system recognizes and know how to handle. We need to sleep when it's dark and eat when it's light. We need to fast sometimes. We need to move. We need to relax. We need to get sunlight. We need to get grounding. And, when we do all of that, we don't need all the medicines that we use, all this super expensive healthcare system or sick care system that is just in some ways just based on making money for some people.
Well, sometimes I pass by a television, like even if I'm in a mall, and I see an ad. In the US, the pharmaceutical companies put ads on television to tell the people about their drug, and then the people will go and ask the doctor for the drug. That's the intent. Sometimes I actually see an ad for a drug that is specifically for the horrible side effects of another drug. I see an ad for it on television. That's unbelievable.
Yeah, it's kind of insane what's happening. So, the good thing is that, in the Polscure in the book, all the strategies are free. So getting in balance and set for a healthy life is all free. Sleep is free. Breathwork is free. Sunshine, of course, free. You can eat real food, cold plunges, it's free, of course. So all the strategies are free, which is also the problem, is that there's no commercial pressure behind it. So people would rather pay for something that makes them sick than doing something for free that makes them healthy.
I agree 100%, but you could take the other side of that same coin and say, this may not get as far and wide as it should because nobody makes money off of it.
Yeah. And that is also the good thing about these devices, that there is money in keeping people healthy and giving you the control. So it's a big shift in mentality. It's a shift from waiting until you get sick, until doing something, and then doing something to avoid getting into that place. And it's also a shift of power from the healthcare system and the doctors and practitioners and into your own hands at all times. So in my mind, these devices is as important for modern days inflammation-based diseases, like antibiotics and vaccines have been to the old days infectious diseases. So it's just as important. It can help you avoid getting the modern day diseases.
Well, Torkil, how can people benefit from your beautiful and detailed knowledge? I know about your book, so if you could state the name of your book once again for us.
It's called The Pulse Cure. It's in a paper. Yeah, it's in a paperback version, but also an audiobook. So if you have an iPhone, probably a Samsung or an Android as well, you can download it, and it's an ebook also. So it's available. It's a normal published book, so it's available on Amazon or Barnes and Noble or whatever.
What if somebody wanted to get lazy and greedy all at the same time and say, no, I want to talk to Torkil one-on-one and for him to guide me in how to use the devices in the best way? Do you do that?
Not at present. We are building a social network called thepulsecure.com, where you can also see a video lecture that I have there that explains how to use the Garmin watches more in detail, so it's visible what I'm talking about. And there's a blog there, and so. And I'm on Instagram also.
So when you go on Instagram, the second letter of your last name, because it's from Norway rather, it looks like a combination of an A and an E. But how would you look for it on Instagram? What letter would you look for?
But I'm Norway. I'm just Dr. Torkil, Dr. Torkil. Okay. So I avoid those letters. So it says the Dr. Torkil.
One tiny question. All of these devices live at the inflection point where AI is only beginning to surge. And I think it's surging exponentially, and it makes perfect sense because the AI itself will promote the AI, make it more intelligent. So it's an exponential thing. So the devices you talk about today, literally in a year and a half, is going to be another universe. So
absolutely.
That just has to be followed, I guess.
Yeah. So the development is really, really fast, and the incorporation of artificial intelligence, giving you advice on how to train. It will probably give you advice on how to eat. Can probably, after some time, identify what kind of food shouldn't you eat by knowing what you're eating and just identifying, okay, when you eat, eggs, your heart rate goes up. So maybe you should try to cut out eggs. Maybe you have a food intolerance, for example. And it could probably give you more detailed advice, also connected to DNA tests and blood work. So the possibilities that you can attach to this dashboard, will be, almost limitless.
Well, Torkil, I want to thank you very much for taking the time. I know you're going crazy. You're very popular, and rightfully so. You have a lot of, and thank you for taking the time. We learned a lot from you, and I hope to see you again soon.
Yeah, thank you so much for letting me speak about these important things on your podcast. So thank you for your time.
All right. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Thanks for joining me today. Click the subscribe button for more video. Got a question or comment? I love questions and comments. Leave yours below. And here's another video you've got to see.